House call with House Democrats. President Joe Biden committed to keeping the amount of money offered through the coronavirus survival checks at $1,400. But there is a huge caveat to this, and that caveat revolves around the idea that there needs to be stricter means testing to limit the amount of Americans who are eligible for the check. So Joe Biden said in this meeting, we can't walk away from an additional $1,400 in direct checks that we proposed because the people need them. We can better target them, he said, but I'm not going to start my administration by breaking a promise to the American people. And there was some indication that Biden would fall in this direction after Jeff Stein from the Washington Post tweeted that some senior Democrats are looking at lowering the threshold on stimulus payments so they start phasing out above $50,000 for single payers, $75,000 for heads of households, and $100,000 for married couples. So this is an issue because means testing as it stood before these updates was a problem because it relies on tax filings from 2019. And if you guys can remember, there was no coronavirus pandemic in 2019. That's when everyone was working. That's when everyone was kind of living life as normal or usual. And then in 2020 is when tens of millions of Americans were laid off from their jobs and lost their livelihoods. So to do means testing at all is ridiculous. To do stricter means testing than what we experienced before with the previous relief packages is even worse. And the fact that Biden is even entertaining this is incredibly depressing and disgusting. Now, Biden has also called on Democrats to stick together as they push forward with his relief package, nearly $2 trillion. And he's made clear that shifting toward the $618 billion plan offered by 10 GOP senators was, quote, not in the cards. So that's the positive side of the story. But again, there shouldn't be any means testing. That's where I stand on it. Now, before we hear from some of the Republicans, Nando, why don't you jump in?
Well, I just find it both on some level, like on a political level, I find it slightly heartening, the pose that Joe Biden is taking, that it looks like they are trying to at least get the $1.9 trillion package through. What's super frustrating is what you're talking about, this obsession with means testing. And again, these are all Democrats. This is an intra-Democratic Party fight. This is not some sort of negotiation with Republicans. This is quote unquote, the good team fighting within itself. It's the conservative elements within the Democratic Party caucus. I mean, everyone knows about Joe Manchin, but there are others as well. Like Mark Warner is super conservative out of Virginia, and others. And that's what's frustrating about this. It just feels like a self-inflicted wound that they don't have to do. They really don't have to do this. There is no benefit at all to this. There's no political benefit. There's no economic benefit. There's nothing because they're not going to get a single Republican. And I have been heartened by the reports that said that Joe Biden's talks with Joe Manchin were something along the lines of, listen, Joe, we can't do what we did in 2009 with the stimulus, in which we negotiated Republicans for 10 months and then we got not a single one of their votes anyway. And we just whittled down our own proposal and didn't get any of their votes anyway. So again, I think the politics of it have changed a little bit somewhat in the Democratic Party, but this means testing zombie still cannot be killed. It's like as much as we try to kill it, he keeps on going, just coming back. And it's like, we need to target certain people. And it's like, no, that's the stupidest thing in the world. It's political suicide. It only creates really pissed off people in the middle income brackets, which again, are typically the basis of any far right movement, like are like the sort of middle income, petty bourgeois sectors of society. So, that's just, anyway, it's incredibly frustrating that they even entertain these ideas, but we'll see.
But we should also address why they entertain the ideas, because you're absolutely right in that there is no political benefit for Democrats to pursue means testing, even stricter means testing than what we experienced before. And there's really like no reason for them to go in this direction other than the fact that their donors are pushing for them to implement this kind of means testing. The Daily Poster, that's David Sirota's publication, wrote a fantastic piece. This is by Andrew Perez. And I wanna give you some of the details, because I think it's important to get granular and understand what motivates these lawmakers. So for instance, the US Chamber of Commerce, which spent $82 million lobbying in Washington last year alone, sent a letter to the White House and Congress urging them to consider, quote, targeting any additional stimulus checks based on income, loss of employment, or similar criteria. So let me give you a little excerpt from their letter. They write, while the pandemic-induced recession has created near unprecedented levels of hardship, are they not merciful for acknowledging that? The impact has not been universal, the chamber wrote. The Census Bureau Pulse survey indicates that while a majority of households with less than $50,000 in income have experienced a loss of employment income, a majority of households with more than $50,000 in income, including those between $50,000 and $150,000, have not experienced any loss in earned income. Now that's a lie, and I'll provide the evidence of that in just a second. But the Daily Poster also writes that the campaign to limit survival check eligibility was recently boosted by a study that we talked about on the show by economists at Opportunity Insights, a Harvard University think tank bankrolled by the family foundations of billionaires Mark Zuckerberg, Bloomberg, and Bill Gates. So,
love those.
I mean, these
three of my favorites
are trash. Think tanks just launder lobbying in this country. It's a way of creating, it's a way of funding politicians and bribing them through dark money. They just do it through these think tanks. But go ahead, Nando.
I mean, it's funny because they specify, even if those numbers were true, that people with between $50,000 and $100,000 experienced, or a majority of those people experienced no loss of income. That means it feels like a good chunk of those people did lose income, right? It's just a majority. It could be 51%, like that means that 49% did. We're just gonna leave those people behind. You're just gonna leave those people out of it because they made $50,000 in 2019. Who knows what their circumstances are now? This obsession in America with possibly overspending a little bit on people who don't entirely deserve it is so disastrous. That kind of thinking is so disastrous because the effects of it are always to end up hurting the poor more. So again, we talk about it a lot on the Jacobin Show. Broad-based universal programs are robust because it includes everybody. They therefore become much harder politically to claw back. That's why Social Security has lasted for 80 years. Despite decades of propaganda against it, because everyone is in it, everyone pays into it, no matter who you are, it's incredibly difficult to claw back politically. When you create these means-tested programs, you create people who get it and people who don't. Therefore, the people who don't get it hate the people who do. It's a way of splitting up the population, and that's what creates political division. When you do these broad-based programs, you create political unity. If you talk about when they talk about Washington, oh, we're not divided, we're divided as a country, we need more unity. We need all those platitudes. A good way to do it is not through some sort of rhetoric about political unity. It's about implementing broad-based universal programs. That will create unity because that ties us together as people.
No, it's such a great point. It's such a great point. And you just kind of crystallized something that I've been trying to communicate, but I haven't articulated it as clearly as you have, right? When we hear about unity from the Biden administration, we need to reject the idea that the unity needs to be accomplished in the halls of Congress. I don't care about that unity. No. I care about unity among the American people, and you're right. It's much more likely, it's almost guaranteed that a program is gonna be popular once it's a universal program. And by the way, the fact that means testing only further divides the country is not the bug, it's the feature. That is that is intentional, right?
Yeah.
And so let me give you the reality of the economic circumstances that Americans are facing today, because we keep hearing about this disgusting study from Opportunity Insights, again, a think tank that's funded by billionaires Mark Zuckerberg, Bloomberg, and Bill Gates. The fact of the matter is, Americans are suffering. 45% of households earning between $50,000 and $150,000 have actually experienced a loss of employment income since March of 2020, including 48% of households earning between $50,000 and $75,000. Nearly a quarter of households earning between $50,000 and $150,000 say they expect to lose employment income over the next 4 weeks. And so these are US Census statistics. And so if you want to do your own digging, you can do your own digging and see how this has really impacted people. Even the professional managerial class, like there have been people who have lost their livelihoods, they've lost wages, they've lost their income as a result of this pandemic. And if you're genuinely concerned, if you're one of the few people who watch this show and you're genuinely concerned about money going to the wealthy through this program that's meant to help people who've been impacted negatively by the pandemic, just think about how we need to get checks in people's hands immediately. And means testing just further delays that process. And if you're worried that just bypassing the means testing and getting the checks out as soon as possible is gonna mean money going toward wealthy people, how about we just tax them when they file for taxes? Tax them and get that money back. It's not that difficult, guys. It's not that difficult. I just want everyone to understand that these talking points that we're getting from conservative Democrats, from this think tank, from Wall Street, it's all meant to take any type of social safety net, any type of aid from the government away from people. And that's the issue here. So, and again, when you just look at the root of the problem and when you look at the influencing factors, it always goes back to the donors who tend to be the ones who own these corporations, who own these companies, who want to keep people dependent on them and their crappy wages. That's a huge part of it as well. So that's where we're at. And I do want to just quickly go to Lindsey Graham's positioning on all of this, because if you're a Democrat and you agree with this guy, there's a problem. Let's take a look.
I think it needs to be more targeted. I don't mind having more direct payments. I'd like to make it less targeted. And I don't mind discussing raising the minimum wage when the COVID problem passes and we get back on our feet. I do mind doubling it in the middle of a pandemic. And I do believe that this $1.9 trillion package is going to do more harm than good to the American economy. And the reason we're having this debate, the way we're having this debate, is because they have unlimited power, my Democratic colleagues. You've chosen to do this. The 10 Republicans who went down to the White House, I appreciate their effort. Maybe some good will come from that. But this process we're engaged in today makes me wonder if it was worth their time.
It's just so pathetic. If you're a Democrat who's like regurgitating those same talking points, just quit, resign. You know? You're not interested in like I would be so embarrassed if I was on the House floor agreeing with, or Senate floor, agreeing with Lindsey Graham of all people, someone who has absolutely, no courage, is like this sniveling, conniving person who will lick anyone's boots if it means he's going to remain relevant. Like he's, and no one who voted in favor of Trump's tax cuts for the rich can make that argument about how spending money on helping people during a crisis is going to hurt the country economically because of the deficit. They don't care about the deficit. Just be clear on that.
Yeah, it's like Lindsey Graham is like, the thing is about the minimum wage is I like to go to McDonald's on Saturday mornings with the dollar menu. And if you raise the minimum wage to $15, maybe the dollar menu will become the $2 menu and I can't get my apple pie. And it's just, it's stupid. It's the stupidest thing in the world. Yes, you do not want to be agreeing with Lindsey Graham if you are a call yourself a Democrat in any meaningful way. It's just the minimum wage arguments are always, they're the most mind-numbing ones, because first of all, the minimum wage has not increased in like 20 years. Okay,
since 2009. 2009 was the last time the federal minimum wage increased.
12 years, and it's just. Like obviously like the cost of living has increased because the cost of living goes up over time, always does. And so this idea that we can't increase the minimum wage because it might increase the price of a McDonald's burger, which is what they always say. Somehow they're obsessed with McDonald's burgers and the price of McDonald's burgers whenever there's a talk about the minimum wage. It doesn't make any sense. Just ignore it, please. Viewers at home, just ignore it. Like, trust me, we can talk about why, but the short answer is just ignore it. They're stupid. They're wrong. There's no evidence that the minimum wage actually has a depreciating effect on jobs or anything like that. There's countries that have much higher minimum wages than the United States and do not have like vast numbers of unemployed. They actually have good numbers of unemployed. So just don't listen to them ever.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.